Local news, national news, even feel-good news, delivering the topics that are relevant to you.
That's why I listen to Joe. He covers it all.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
I am so excited. I could not wait. From Thursday, I couldn't wait till Tuesday. I couldn't wait to be on the radio tonight so we could chat about things. There's a lot to chat about tonight. And I want to welcome a guest onto the show here first thing. And then I'm going to explain why this guest is joining us. But I want to welcome to the show Ben Galbraith. Ben is the senior pollster for Victory Insights, which is a polling company out of Naples. Ben, welcome to the Joe Kelley Show. How are you?
Thanks, Joe. Thanks for having me. I am doing great and looking forward to this conversation.
Me too. And let me set it up for our listeners as to how we got to this place. We were talking about a political poll last week. I don't remember the exact one, but then we had what we call an open mic, or a message that was left for us, and it was this. Let me play it.
And Joe, to talk more about the polls, I've never been asked to answer a poll, let alone a national poll. So who are the people that are receiving these polls, and how do we know that they're even accurate? Because I've never received them.
So the greatest of irony is literally like an hour after I got that message, I got a text message from Victory Insights, Ben, your polling company, and it asked if I wanted to participate in a poll. Now, I got over my initial skepticism at first. My initial, it's a shame, Ben, in this day and age that we always have to be skeptical as to whether or not it's a scam or if it's a real poll or something real like that. And once I kind of confirmed that, this is a legit company, I not only filled out the poll, but then I asked if I could talk to somebody about the poll I just filled out. So that's where we are today. You're the somebody. And Ben, you're the senior pollster for Victory Insights. So I kind of have two questions for you. One, what were the results of the poll that you took? And then two, if you could kind of tell us a little bit about how polling works, because that's not the first time I've heard from a listener who's been skeptical saying, well, I've never been called for a poll, so they must not work. So let's start with the results of the poll that you conducted last week.
Sure. So the results were pretty interesting. What we found is that for the 2024 Republican nomination for President of the United States, it's actually a statistical tie between DeSantis and Trump within the state of Florida. So obviously things are a little bit different in other states, and Trump has the lead in pretty much every other state. But at the moment in Florida, in both a head-to-head ballot and with a full ballot with, Mike Pence, Tim Scott, Nikki Haley, and all those people, there's only about 1% separating DeSantis and Trump, meaning that, for all intents and purposes, it's impossible to say who's ahead at this time.
And again, that's just for the state of Florida. And as you know, and I think a lot of our listeners know, we don't elect a president nationally. We elect presidents state by state. So those state polls really matter.
Yep, that's true. And, obviously you hear a lot about Iowa and New Hampshire, since they're some of the first states, that in the primary process. But a lot of attention has been turned to Florida in this election cycle because that's where both DeSantis and Trump, the two Republican frontrunners, hail from. So, there's a lot of focus on Florida. That could be the deciding factor, the turning point in the primary. So there's a lot of eyes on this race.
I don't need to tell you, Ben, but sometimes polling can be risky business. Sometimes pollsters get things way off. Sometimes pollsters get things right on the money. How has polling changed in the last 10, 15 years as we've moved towards more cell phones, more online stuff? I mean, the way that you guys poll people can't even be the same as it once was.
Yeah, that's true. I think it's important to change with the times because it used to be primarily, if not entirely, interactive voice response, which means just landlines. So you would just be calling landlines and asking people, who you're going to vote for. But not only the conduction part has changed, but also the analysis. So, it used to pretty much just be tallying up the votes for each candidate and saying, okay, this candidate has, X percent of the vote and this candidate has Y percent of the vote. Now it's a lot more complex. Now there's a lot more statistical analysis that goes into it, with computing the margin of error and different, situations and running simulations on how the election could turn out. So it's definitely changed. And you're right. It's sometimes it's difficult to predict the future because that is what polling at its core really is. But I think with the addition of a lot of statistical techniques in the last few years, we've been able to get more and more accurate as time goes on. And
let me just let our listeners know how the survey came to me. I got a text message that asked if you would like to participate in a survey, and I didn't know if there was a real person on the other end of that text or not. But I texted back a couple of questions about its authenticity, and there was, sure enough, someone there to text me back. It wasn't a bot. I could tell by the way it was written. But there was someone there who responded to me and assured me and gave me ways to verify that your company was not a scam, that it's totally legit. And then from there, I tapped the link. I didn't want to click a link until I was sure it was clean. So from there, I tapped the link and then went to an online survey. But that's not an online survey that anybody can have access to, right? You've got to be invited to do it.
That's correct. So, I know your listener had questions about how they select the people as well. So we select a mix of people, but we are more likely to select individuals who have voted in prior, GOP primaries, right? So we text them a link, and it's not only the fact that you have the link is that verifies you and that results in us using your responses. But if you might remember when you took the poll, we asked again for your phone number there. So after we receive the responses, we only include those where the phone numbers match up to people we texted, so that you can't pass it out to your friends and family and try and sway the results by all answering a certain way.
That is interesting, because I noted on the air, I said it's interesting that they asked for my phone number even though they texted me, and that does explain that.
Yep, there's a lot of people are skeptical about polls, and a lot of people try to manipulate polls. So it's important to only keep the responses from those who we ask to participate, because otherwise, the sample can get tainted. Right, because
a poll like you take is completely different than a poll taken, say, online, and forgive me for using this terminology, but Cat Turd. Cat Turd is a Twitter.
Right.
You probably know who he is. Cat Turd is a Twitter account, very conservative, but they do polls all the time. But there's a huge difference in selecting people, a select amount of people to participate in a poll versus putting a poll online that everybody has access to.
Yep, that's right. And, without any disrespect to Cat Turd, one of those two types of polls is a lot more reliable. One of those two types, obviously the type that we do, you're able to balance the results both on the front end and on the back end. So you can only ask for responses from a mix of people that represents the electorate well. So, it's not all supporters of one particular candidate or all people from, some particular region. It's a good mix of people. And then after we get the results, we have all this data on them, and we can balance the results again in case there's any discrepancies, and make sure that the final percentages and the final vote tallies for everyone are representative of the entire electorate.
And when you take a survey, and I like to mention that I only remember two college classes that I took, two classes. One was communication law, but the other was statistics. And in statistics, you learn a lot about how polling works. When you guys poll people, and again, I go back to that guy saying, well, I've never been contacted to poll. We got 19 million in Florida. We have 330 million people in America. Odds are very good you will never participate in a poll because of the sampling size. These sampling sizes are never the totality of a state or a district or a city.
That's right. Yeah. And you can find more information on, if for the nerds out there, they want to get more into the specifics of how we do it. We have a lot more information on our methodology at our website, victory-insights.com, or on our Twitter, Victory Polling. But you're right. That's a big question that we get. Oh, I'm a Florida voter and I never received this poll, so therefore the poll must be false. I mean, obviously that's completely ludicrous. And like you said, it's a pretty core tenet of statistics that you don't need a response from everyone in order to get a sample that's good enough to understand big pictures about electorates.
And frankly, we in radio work with that every single day because ratings works the same way. There is no
Yep.
possible way that a ratings company is going to be able to ask 19 million Floridians what their favorite radio station is. So they take smaller samples, and then they decide whether or not they have to weigh those samples when the final numbers come out.
Yep. A lot of things have parallels, and, it sort of brings us back to the point that a lot of people are paying more and more attention to polls. It's Trump tweets and talks about them all the time, and as do a lot of politicos on Twitter and elsewhere, and even state parties. For example, tonight we're doing a Twitter space at 6 p.m. Eastern with Christian Ziegler, the chair of the Florida GOP, because everyone is paying attention to polls nowadays, and there's a lot of efforts to manipulate them. There's a lot of efforts to put too much emphasis on them. But overall, just like ratings, it is a good way to gauge what people are thinking and to gauge what people are saying.
And is there a specialty that Victory Insights focuses on? You mentioned Republican politicians. I mean, is that your sweet spot?
Sure. So we are, in order to have the most unbiased results, we're technically a nonpartisan firm. With that being said, we work almost exclusively with Republican clients across the country, not just in Florida. We find that to be our sweet spot because those are the voters that we work with frequently in Florida, specifically Southwest Florida. I know in Central Florida, things are the same there. And it's, the people we can understand so that we don't just receive the numbers and, paste them on a Word document and say, these are the numbers, but we can also add some personal commentary and talk about what the numbers really mean.
We're talking to senior pollster Ben Galbraith of Victory Insights, and the survey that I took last week on Thursday, the one that kind of got this whole conversation started, is that part of an ongoing series of polls so that you can gauge changes in one way or the other for the candidates?
Sure, that's a great question, and the answer is yes. We have actually done a number of polls specifically about the 2024 Republican primary within the state of Florida. Our first, full-fledged one being in November of 2022, at which point we saw DeSantis actually up by double digits. We then took another poll in April, so just last month, and in the wake of the Trump indictment, where Trump was getting all of this support, people were coming off the sidelines in support of him. People throughout Florida, very influential members of Congress, such as Representative Byron Donalds from Southwest Florida, were endorsing him, and he got this bump in the polls, and he was actually up by double digits in that poll. And now what we're seeing is it's become equalized. And, in the wake of DeSantis' announcement, there's a lot of questions about who's going to win Florida, who has the edge. And, what we can say right now is it's close and it's far from over.
Ben Galbraith is the senior pollster for Victory Insights out of Naples, and this has been a good educational experience for me and for all of our listeners at the same time. Ben, I look forward to speaking with you again. Thank you so much for your time tonight.
Yep. Thanks, Joe. Have a good one.
Yep, you got it. Coming up in a few minutes here on the Joe Kelley Show. Stand by. Target, the retailer Target, is under fire, of course, for their Pride displays. Now the number one hip-hop song on iTunes is an anti-Target song. You'll hear part of that coming up.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk.
We had a lot of fun Friday night out at SeaWorld, and I met Karen from our chat room. Karen came by and said hi, and that was so awesome. So, Karen, thank you for coming by out to SeaWorld Friday night. That roller coaster was a whole lot of fun. And the experience out there was fun. We really enjoyed that. Looking forward to going again at some point in the not-too-distant future. By the way, I got another open mic from the guy who started the polling discussion last week. A nice guy, so he left another open mic.
Hey, that was me that asked last week. That was some good information. It's good to know. But I think the polls you still got to take with a grain of salt. Because remember, they did say that Hillary was going to win, but it turned out to be Trump.
Yeah. I mean, polls really are to be used by the candidates and shouldn't have any bearing on us as voters, unless you're someone who votes, say, like on the bandwagon effect, or maybe you vote for the underdog. If you're an underdog voter or a bandwagon effect voter, then polls matter to you. But if you vote based upon your ideological beliefs, then polls should have no bearing whatsoever on how you're going to cast your vote. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. Target is still reeling from their Pride displays, and now the number one hip-hop song on iTunes is a boycott. It's called Boycott Target. Why is that hard for me to say? Boycott Target is the song, and I think I have been able to, I don't know if there's any cuss words in it. I couldn't understand all the lyrics, but I don't believe there's any cuss words in this.
Intentional shoppers. There's a cleanup on every aisle. Target is targeting your kids.
They put a target on my back, but they targeting your kids. They don't even need to ask, cause you all know what it is. Yeah, that's why I keep a strap, and I'm always by my biz. This agenda gotta stop. Yeah, you know we gonna win when they target. Yeah, they targeting. Target. Yeah, they target kids.
Isn't that interesting? Target. Yeah, they target kids. How interesting that is. It's actually kind of a catchy tune, but of course I like hip hop. And then there's this actress. Her name is Rachel Lefevre. She was evidently in Twilight, is that not the vampire and werewolf movie from yesteryear? I don't know what character she played in that movie, but evidently she is the mother of a child that, well, anyhow, here, I'll let her speak for herself. This is what she posted to her Instagram page.
So I just walked into Target, and the right behind me here where you see all these lovely swimsuits, that's where the Pride display used to be. And I came in here 2 days ago, and my 7-year-old, who's non-binary, saw it and said, "Look, Mom, it's Pride. Look, they're going to celebrate me." And because some people complained and threw some stuff to the ground, or I don't know what happened, they have moved the Pride section to the back of the store. So the next time my 7-year-old comes to Target, or rather, I can't bring them here anymore, at least for the entire month of June, because if they walk in, and all the other people who walk in and go, "Where'd it go?" are going to realize that they are being successful in trying to erase them. We could do so much better than this. We're not supposed to negotiate with terrorists.
Terrorists. Not supposed to negotiate with terrorists. I'm assuming she's referring to you as terrorists, people who don't want to walk in and see women's clothing with places to tuck a penis. Yeah. 844-580-WDBO or use the open mic in the WDBO app.
Weather brought to you by ProTech Air Conditioning and Plumbing Services. This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. Join the conversation now by using the open mic in the WDBO app. Now, the Joe Kelley Show on Orlando's news and talk, WDBO.
Hey, Joe. I missed this morning and actually most of the day, but yesterday I looked up at around 9:45 at night, and there were over 20, I'm assuming, satellites in a row moving from west to east in space. Were they? What was that?
Yeah.
Anybody know?
Yeah, they were. They definitely were. While I did not see that myself, I think it is safe to assume if you saw what appeared to be 20 small satellites in a row flying through the sky, that was probably Starlink internet satellites. As a number of people around the globe have reported seeing the satellites. I look forward to the day in which I see it, because I have not yet seen that, and I often look up at night just on hopes that I'll see a string of Starlink internet satellites move it across the sky. I had a really interesting day yesterday on Memorial Day. It's no secret that my wife and I live in downtown Orlando, and we live in a high-rise. We live at 55 West. And 55 West, as downtown high-rises go, has a bit of a reputation of being a party tower, having younger residents and, being in a state of disrepair and needs help and drug busts happen now and again there and that kind of stuff. I was in the elevator. So every night between like 10:30 and 11, I take my stepdog, Arwen, out for a walk. And Saturday night, I was in the elevator at about 10:30, 10:45. And so we got to go down 32 floors to get to the ground floor. And so it's a pretty long elevator ride. And like the elevator stops at 30, and about 9 or 10 people got into the elevator. And it was definitely a party crowd. I'm standing there in my pajama pants. Laurel, you can imagine this. I'm standing there in my pajama pants, an undershirt, and my Crocs.
Snazzy.
Yeah. And then I've got a dog on a leash, and my dog has a little lesion on his side right now. So he's wearing one of those Elizabethan collars. I mean, the whole thing is embarrassing, right? So I'm in the elevator, and then this party crowd gets in, and they immediately start looking at me, and I'm like, why are they looking at me? And one of the guys shouts out, "Hey, man, you like weed, don't you?" And I'm like, And before I could even say anything, he pulls out this big bag of weed and sticks it in my face and says, "Don't you like the way this smells?"
Awkward.
Yeah, it was really weird. I'm like, I don't know the proper reaction to that. So that was Saturday night. Excuse me. So after that happened and my wife and I had a discussion, we're like, maybe it's time to leave. Maybe it's time to leave downtown Orlando. And so we, just for kicks and giggles, we thought, let's look around somewhere. Let's look and find a place. So this is going to be really crazy, right? So we found a 55 plus community, which I think is the funniest thing, that if we were to go from 55 West to 55 plus community. Now, so we went into this 55 plus community on Monday, on Labor Day. I was surprised they were even open. Not Labor Day, Memorial Day. We went in there on Memorial Day yesterday, Monday, and we had a tour of this 55 plus community. And first of all, it was gorgeous. It was absolutely gorgeous. And puts 55 West to shame. I mean, the carpets were nice and clean, something we don't have at 55 West. The walls were not marred, something we don't have at 55 West. Everything looked really nice and pristine, which is something that we don't have at 55 West. And as they were showing us around, the leasing agent was showing us around, because it was Memorial Day and because they're 55 plus crowd, there were a bunch of the greatest generation, if you will, sitting in the clubhouse, and there was a Memorial Day ceremony going on. It was really cool. And as we kind of walked into that room, suddenly all of these 70-year-olds started looking at us with the squinty eyes, like, what are they doing here? And when we sat down with a leasing agent, she says, "Okay, now who will this place be for?" And I'm like, I'm not sure I understand. Wait, are you asking who's going to live here? We are. And she says, this is a 55 plus community. And I said, we're 55. Both my wife and I are exactly 55 years old, though I would argue, and many have, that neither of us look like we're 55. And so we would be clearly not only the youngest there, but the youngest looking if we were to live there. And I said to my wife, in all honesty, I said, my biggest fear about living here is I'll be hit on all the time by 70-year-old women are going to hit on me all the time. And then, the septuagenarian and octogenarian group, they're swingers and stuff, aren't they? I mean, isn't that the case? Isn't that what we read all the time, Laurel?
That's the rumor about pineapples and such, yes.
Yeah, so I don't know if we'd be moving into a swinging community or something like that. So I think we put those plans on hold. But I am curious, for anybody and I think we're kind of in that right demo here, but anybody who's moved into a 55-plus community, I'd love to get your take on that, of what you thought about it, particularly if you're on the lower end of the 55-plus like I am. We just barely made it in. But, man, it seems a lot more my speed, man. It just seems it's nice and quiet there. And everything is clean, which I really liked. So if you have been one of those people who have decided to go 55 plus, I want to hear from you. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326, or use the open mic in the WDBO app. Triple Team Traffic now. Another open mic with a very good and relevant question.
Joe, I have a question. Since Governor DeSantis signed the law saying that he doesn't have to resign to be president, now that he's going to be campaigning for 2 years, a year and a half. Is he spending Florida's taxpayers' money on the government plane, all of his expense accounts, all the expenses that he's going through? If he is, that's not right. He has more money in his coffers than anybody else.
Yeah, those are really, really good questions. And I know that the DeSantis campaign recently moved to make it so that their flights aren't trackable. I do believe, though, that UCF student is still tracking his plane, but it's like delayed by a day, just like with Elon Musk. He used to track it in real time, then delayed it by a day. There are really well-established rules for campaigning and what is supposed to be paid for by a campaign and what is not supposed to be paid for by a campaign. And oftentimes where the real scam here comes in is that, so if DeSantis is chartering a plane, which presumably he is, I know that before Governor Rick Scott, we had state planes. We had a small fleet of planes for the state, and then Governor Rick Scott, because of his immense wealth, he didn't need state planes, so he sold off the fleet of state planes. I mean, we have a state, frankly, that's big enough that a governor would need a small plane, an airplane, a jet, to get from one side of the state in relative speed. But I don't believe we currently have any state of Florida airlines. So, and I don't imagine that Governor DeSantis is flying commercial. So he's probably chartering a plane. So if you figure the price of chartering a plane, and I don't have the slightest idea what size plane there, but let's just say for the sake of argument that it's $100,000 to charter a plane to fly to Iowa to campaign in Iowa. Well, the candidate, in this case DeSantis, generally does not have to pay for the entire plane with campaign funds. Oftentimes, he only has to pay for a seat or 2 seats or 5 seats or 10 seats. He pays the equivalent of what a commercial airline flight would be if he was flying commercial. So you can see where there'd be a huge disparity between what the campaign actually pays for, because they're simply, quote, buying a seat on a commercial airline, even though they're not buying a seat on a commercial airline. They're paying for a charter jet, but they don't have to pay for the full cost of the charter jet. They just have to pay the cost of the seats on the charter jet. I hope that makes sense. I hope I'm doing a good job of explaining it. There is a real good chance that the Florida taxpayers are paying for part of this, particularly in that unless and until Governor DeSantis gets Secret Service protection, which he currently does not have, generally governors are protected by the state police. So in this case, it would be someone from like the FDLE. I don't know what police force exactly, if not the FDLE. But typically, even leaving the state, DeSantis will have state police with him, and the state will pay for the state police that go with him. So one way or another, you can rest assured that taxpayers are paying for at least some of his presidential campaign, and that is one of the reasons why a lot of people argue that candidates in general should not be able to keep one seat while campaigning for another seat. Well, what do you think? 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. Or you can use the open mic in the WDBO app.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Your next chance to win the WDBO payroll payout of $1,000 happens tomorrow at 8 a.m. during Orlando's morning news. Just listen for the keyword and then tap the payroll payout button in the WDBO app.
$1,000. $1,000.
Get paid just for listening to WDBO.
This is awesome.
So Laurel is our chief music correspondent. She knows all the music, especially the younger music. So I somehow got Paramore mixed up with Evanescence. Evanescence, is that the name of the band?
That is, which is weird. They're definitely different.
I know, they don't even sound the same. I mean, the names of the bands don't sound the same, but the Paramore lead singer is a girl named Hayley Williams, and she, at a concert over the weekend in I don't know where it is. It's not. I know it's not in Florida, but I do believe it was in the United States. So anyhow, I bleeped this. So Arushi, let not your heart be troubled. You don't need to bleep anything here. I bleeped everything that's going to be said. But this is Paramore on stage, the lead singer Hayley Williams, giving her political views over the weekend about Ron DeSantis.
I'm happy to tell you, I'm very comfortable talking politics. If you vote for Ron DeSantis, you're f***ing dead to me. So is that comfortable enough for anyone?
So I don't know if you could hear it all the way, but she says, if you vote for Ron DeSantis, you're effing dead to me. That from Paramore, and from the lead singer there, Hayley Williams. I wonder if she speaks on behalf of the rest of the band in that situation. I think of the Dixie Chicks, and now known as the Chicks, but the Dixie Chicks, who ruined their career by savaging George Bush while they were overseas. And I would have to think the rest of the band was displeased with the one who made the comments. And another interesting comment here, if I do have time. I do. So this is Kevin McCarthy, the Speaker of the House today. Is this an odd comment for the Speaker of the House to make? Listen to this.
For things we bought that we can return, like COVID money to China and others, we're bringing that back. We might have a child that has no job, no dependents, but sitting on a couch. We're going to encourage that person to get a job and have to go to work, which gives them worth and value. We're going to look at other things, too, to make the economy stronger.
Was that weird? He said if there's a child that doesn't have a job, we're going to put him to work. So we're in favor of child labor now? I mean, is that how bad the workforce has become, that nobody will go to work, that we now need children? I mean, I know there have been children that have been found at meat packing plants and others. It just seems troublesome. Coming up next here on the Joe Kelley Show, Donald Trump today says he wants to get rid of birthright citizenship. We're going to break it down for you next.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Now, WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580. Triple Team Traffic.
I-4 westbound still very, very heavy right now from Parr on to the 408 eastbound ramp, and then from Sand Lake to 535 and Osceola Parkway into Champions Gate. You've got lots of brake lights as well as you pass the Disney exits on I-4 eastbound. ProTech Air Conditioning and Plumbing Service. For honesty, integrity, and 100% customer satisfaction, call ProTech 407-291-1644 or visit ProTechAC.com. From the WDBO Triple Team Traffic Center, I'm Paul Cross.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. Talk and discussion on the latest breaking national news.
Crude oil prices continue to fall.
Local news.
You're not going to have Disney have its own government in Central Florida.
And stories that matter to you. Use the open mic in the WDBO app and let your voice be heard on the Joe Kelley Show.
All right, let me just grab my copy of the Constitution here. All right, let me go through the amendments of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14th. All right, we got to talk about the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And while it is a bit wordy, we really only need to focus on the first sentence of the 14th Amendment to the Constitution. And it reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state wherein they reside. That is the birthright clause. That means if you're born in the United States, you are automatically a United States citizen. Well, Donald Trump, former president and presidential candidate Donald Trump, released a 3.5-minute video today saying that he, on his first day in office, if reelected to the White House, on his first day in office, will eliminate the birthright citizenship for undocumented immigrants. Take a listen to Donald Trump.
Joe Biden has launched an illegal foreign invasion of our country, allowing a record number of illegal aliens to storm across our borders. From all over the world they came. Under Biden's current policies, even though these millions of illegal border crossers have entered the country unlawfully, all of their future children will become automatic U.S. citizens. Can you imagine? They'll be eligible for welfare, taxpayer-funded health care, the right to vote, chain migration, and countless other government benefits many of which will also profit the illegal alien parents. This policy is a reward for breaking the laws of the United States and is obviously a magnet helping draw the flood of illegals across our borders. They come by the millions and millions and millions. They come from mental institutions. They come from jails, prisoners, some of the toughest, meanest people you'll ever see. The United States is among the only countries in the world that says that even if neither parent is a citizen nor even lawfully in the country, their future children are automatic citizens the moment the parents trespass onto our soil. As has been laid out by many scholars, this current policy is based on a historical myth and a willful misinterpretation of the law by the open borders advocates.
And I will get into what the misinterpretation is coming up in just a moment after he concludes his comments here.
There aren't that many of them around. It's amazing. Who wants this? Who wants to have prisoners coming into our country? Who wants to have people who are very sick coming into our country? People from mental institutions coming into our country? And come they will. They're coming by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. As part of my plan to secure the border on day one of my new term in office, I will sign an executive order making clear to federal agencies that under the correct interpretation of the law, going forward, the future children of illegal aliens will not receive automatic U.S. citizenship. It's things like this that bring millions of people to our country, and they enter our country illegally. My policy will choke off a major incentive for continued illegal immigration, deter more migrants from coming, and encourage many of the aliens Joe Biden has unlawfully let into our country to go back to their home countries. They must go back. Nobody could afford this. Nobody could do this. And even morally, it's so wrong. My order will also end their unfair practice known as birth tourism, where hundreds of thousands of people from all over the planet squat in hotels for their last few weeks of pregnancy to illegitimately and illegally obtain U.S. citizenship for the child, often to later exploit chain migration to jump the line and get green cards for themselves and their family members. It's a practice that's so horrible and so egregious, but we let it go forward. At least one parent will have to be a citizen or a legal resident in order to qualify. We will secure our borders and we will restore our sovereignty starting on day one. Our country will be great again. Our country will be a country again. We'll have borders. We'll have proper education, and we'll put America first. Thank you.
All right, Donald Trump, in a video statement to Truth Social, saying that he wants to get rid of the birthright citizenship. And a couple thoughts here. In fact, I've got 1,000 thoughts here, one of which is that is the Donald Trump that I would vote for. That is the kind of focused Donald Trump that is talking about what he will do as president, not how much he hates the people that are running against him or how terrible the people that are running against him are. I want to hear what Donald Trump has planned for what could be a second term of Donald Trump. I am so done with hearing Donald Trump talk smack about Ron DeSantis or anybody else. I just want to hear his plans for the White House. And thank you, Donald Trump, for delivering a calm and reasoned discussion for what you're going to do on the first day in the White House if you are to get a second term. Now, I mentioned that there is some conflict as to whether or not he would have the right to do that. And I do have a bit of concern that Donald Trump is making a promise that he cannot fulfill. Certainly not on day one with an executive order. This is the kind of thing that would, at the very least, would need congressional action, at the very most, would need to change the Constitution. And changing the Constitution means you got to get a majority of the states behind this. You got to get a majority of the Congress behind this. It is no small thing to amend the Constitution. It was done that way on purpose. But there are some people who believe, and I am not a constitutional scholar, so I'll leave this to you guys because I know y'all are constitutional scholars. But again, I go back to that first sentence of the 14th Amendment that reads, all persons born or naturalized in the United States, and here's the Here's the real important clause here. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and the state where they reside. Well, some people will make the argument that the jurisdiction thereof cannot pertain to undocumented immigrants. It cannot pertain to people who are in the United States illegally, because illegal aliens or undocumented immigrants cannot vote, they cannot serve on juries, and so are not, quote, subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. Now, I don't know that, as Donald Trump alludes, that a lot of people believe in that interpretation of it, but there certainly are some people who believe in that interpretation of the 14th Amendment. But either way, this is likely going to end up in the United States Supreme Court. And I am reminded of Donald Trump's big moment coming down the escalator when he announced his candidacy. And the first campaign promise he made was that he was going to build a fence and make the Mexicans pay for it, neither of which happened. He built a little bit of fence, and the Mexicans most certainly did not pay for it. And you know, it's one thing to make campaign promises. It's another altogether to be able to fulfill campaign promises. And I know Donald Trump did fulfill a lot of campaign promises, but boy, that big one about getting Mexico to pay for a wall certainly did not come to fruition. And you guys can throw out all the different tariffs and everything else you want and say, no, he did. No, that's not what he said. He didn't say he was going to get tariffs to pay for the wall. He said he was going to get Mexico to pay for the wall, and Mexico most certainly did not pay for the wall. All that having been said, I like the tone of that particular Donald Trump. And honestly, this race to me would be a lot less stressful if that Donald Trump would just stay in charge. If that Donald Trump could just argue for why you're the best. Make the argument for why you should be the guy in the White House, not the argument for why other people shouldn't be in the White House, with the possible exception of Joe Biden. It's one thing to go after members of your own party. It's another altogether to go after members of the opposing party. Notice I didn't say the enemy party. They're not the enemy. Democrats are not the enemy. Liberals are not the enemy. I mean, if you think that liberals are the enemy, then I feel for you. I feel like you live in a constant state of war. I don't feel like I live in a constant state of war because I don't look at the Democrats as my enemy. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic and the WDBO app. What do you think? Should we eliminate the birthright citizenship? Should we get rid of that? Do you think, knowing what you know now, that it could and will likely be challenged all the way to the Supreme Court, is that something that you would get behind and support? 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic and the WDBO app. I will say that while I would be interested to know if that is something that could be overturned without a massive legal challenge or without having to go to all the states, because again, the states aren't going to ratify that. If that has to go to the states to change the Constitution, that is just very, very unlikely to happen at this point. But would you? And then when it comes to illegal immigration, honestly, if I was Donald Trump, I would go back to the original message, but be honest about it this time and say, we're going to finish that wall. I know it's going to cost American taxpayers a lot of money, but we're going to finish that wall. I mean, what is the point in trying to deal with illegal immigrants that are already here if we can't stem the tide of residents, illegal immigrants who are already coming here, who are still coming here? I mean, what is the point in creating these laws that will hopefully drive some of these undocumented immigrants out of the United States unless and until we put up a gate, a wall, a fence that stops them from coming in? And frankly, at this point, we need to be considering whether or not a wall needs to go on the northern border as well, because the northern border has now become a more and more common entrance point for undocumented migrants as the southern border is. Certainly, it's not the same amount of traffic, but the northern border is getting a lot more traffic, illegal traffic coming across it now than perhaps ever in history. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. Let us know your thoughts right now as to whether or not you want to get rid of the citizenship that is guaranteed in the Constitution, at least seemingly guaranteed in the Constitution for right now. We have a couple of the notes here about Ron DeSantis as Kimberly Guilfoyle. You guys remember Kimberly Guilfoyle? Kimberly Guilfoyle is which of the Trump sons is she dating? She's dating one of the Trump sons, and I don't remember which one of the Trump sons. But Kimberly Guilfoyle, in a new interview, says if you're going to run against Donald Trump, you're going to get hurt and damaged badly. She's trying to encourage Ron DeSantis to not run. That is the problem, she says. So by the time Trump is done, we saw this before, 16 people, one after the next, fell off the stage. You're going to end up in the junkyard, and you're not going to be in good shape for 2028. Now, Guilfoyle, for her part, she was a Fox News anchor until 2018 after being accused of sexual harassment by one of her assistants. So she's blasting Ron DeSantis, saying that that DeSantis is going to be destroyed by Donald Trump and that it's going to ruin his chances for running for president in 2028. What do you think? All right, we got open lines for you right now, 844-580-WDBO, 844-580-9326. You can use the open mic in the WDBO app. We'll get your calls, comments coming up straight ahead. Don't nobody go nowhere.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
Much like you, Joe, yes, that's the Trump I love. You know what? When any sort of law or even a constitutional amendment becomes something that is being abused and used to the disadvantage of the entire society, it must be reexamined. So I have no problem with what he said, and I welcome debate.
Donald Trump is saying we should get rid of the birthright citizenship, though it is ensconced in the amendment of the 14th Amendment. There is a little bit of wiggle room there that a court will ultimately have to decide as to whether or not there is wiggle room there in the 14th Amendment. Otherwise, it is going to call for a complete revamp of the Constitution. We'll have to have either a constitutional convention or we're going to have this ratified by the states and have it pass out of a majority of the House and the Senate. Michelle is joining us at 844-580-WDBO. You're on the Joe Kelley Show. Michelle, how are you?
Oh, my gosh. How are you? I'm a new listener.
I am so glad to hear that. Thank you for listening to us.
Well, I kind of was listening to a few of the conversation you had, I guess, a little bit earlier. And I love Trump and I love DeSantis. I love them both. Now, I do know that Trump, I know how he can be. But I also believe that anytime there is, when there's elections coming up, this is what they all do. And I don't love it because I love DeSantis.
And I'm sorry, when you say this is what they all do you mean talking smack about one another?
They're all going to do it.
Yeah.
Wait till they get on stage.
Honestly, I'm disappointed in Ron DeSantis because Ron DeSantis has been taking swings back at Donald Trump. And frankly, I think Ron DeSantis should take the high ground. I think would really set the example of the difference between those two men. If Ron DeSantis just stayed focused on policy issues and stay out of the mud, I think that would give him a much better shot at the White House, at least at the nomination, than if he rolls in the mud with Donald Trump.
Well, I agree, and that's the whole problem with this, is that me and my boyfriend, we talk about this. We were Trump lovers initially. However, he's kind of migrated to DeSantis. He can't stand the fact of how Donald Trump is. He just feels he's like a child. He's immature. But I do believe some of that. However, he did a very good job the last time he was in. And people can't, that's what he did. He did a great job. I think most people would agree to that. And most people, there are some that don't want to agree to that. But he did. I mean, I just think he did a great job. And I think DeSantis would do a fabulous job also. But I don't think you really think DeSantis has gotten in the mud with him? I mean, there might be a little bit, but I haven't seen a whole lot of that, and I listen every day. So
he is taking gentle bites out of the sloppy apple when he could just stay on the high road. He is certainly not stooping to the level that Donald Trump does when it comes to name calling and stuff like that. But if I was Governor DeSantis, I would never have the word Trump come out of my mouth unless it was during a debate or something else like that. I would stay focused on the message.
Well, I agree. I just find it, it's just that Trump is starting to say some really crappy things about him. And I think if he doesn't do some kind of punching back, people will be like, well, is that true?
Michelle, there is a phenomenon that occurs here on this radio show. If I play an open mic from someone that says, hey, Joe, you're the biggest a-hole. Nobody likes you. You should get off the radio. And if I were to play that on the radio, then the next thing you know, I'd have 20 open mics or 20 phone calls from people defending me. Well, the same thing would happen in the DeSantis versus Trump. If Trump was the only one out there talking smack, and DeSantis was taking the high road and only talking about policy, I think more people like you and your boyfriend and others would step up to defend DeSantis. He doesn't need to defend himself, much like I don't need to defend myself, because listeners will and voters will. They'll step up and make that defense.
Well, and that's true. And I think we kind of thought about, well, we wish he didn't jump in the race because it's going to be a bloodbath. Yep. And we feel like he's going to be more tarnished from this than he would have been if he would have just stayed out. But then there are people that say Trump can't win.
Yeah, there certainly are.
I'm just not
Yep.
Yeah,
Michelle,
so I'm just not sure about any of that.
I am so glad you're listening now, and I hope you'll join us again every weekday afternoon from 5 till 7 here on the Joe Kelley Show. Thank you for listening to WDBO, and thanks for your call at 844-580-WDBO.
This is WDBO 107.3 FM and AM 580, Orlando's news and talk. In-depth segments on topics that matter to Orange, Seminole, Osceola, and all of Central Florida. The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO.
I love your show every night. You're doing great, bud.
All right, I was anticipating this open mic, and I got it, and I'm excited. This is my favorite open mic of the night. Are you ready?
Hey, Joe, you're an a-hole, and you should get off the radio.
Now, if you're just tuning in, you're thinking, why is Joe laughing at that? Well, you had to have heard the last segment. Because anyhow, so there you go. You're an a-hole, and you should get off the radio. Thank you very much for that.
So does that mean if Trump gets rid of birthright citizenship, does that mean he has to go back to England? Because wasn't his mother from England? So how does he get to stay and everybody else has to go?
Yeah, well, if Trump becomes president again, and if a President Trump ends birthright citizenship, it won't be retroactive. It's not going to go back to everybody who was born in the United States and whether or not they were legal residents or not.
Joe, all of the Constitution's amendments, all our rights are rights for citizens. They're not rights for non-citizens or people from foreign countries. They're guidelines for them to act accordingly or govern themselves accordingly while here, but they do not apply fully to undocumented citizens or peoples who happen to be in the United States. You must be a U.S. citizen.
So, hashtag fun fact, that's not true. The U.S. Constitution does apply, not in every aspect, but there are parts of the United States Constitution that apply to all people, whether they are citizens of the United States or not citizens of the United States. Most visitors to the U.S. have the same protections as citizens, but they don't necessarily have the same rights as citizens. But many of those protections are laid out in the U.S. Constitution. So that is not entirely accurate. 844-580-WDBO. It's 844-580-9326. Let's go to Lobo. Hey, Lobo, you're on WDBO. How are you?
Joe, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great, thanks. I'm glad you're calling.
Yes, sir. And so
about the 14th, amendment. And yes, I'm not a constitutional lawyer, but the parents are here illegally. If they're breaking our laws just being here, and if they had been held accountable, they wouldn't be here right here to have children. So I don't know, and maybe you can explain how this would be against our Constitution, because they shouldn't even be here to have children.
Well, it would be against our Constitution because our Constitution says that if you're born in the United States, you're a citizen of the United States. I mean, it's as clear as day in the Constitution, with again that one exception. And subject to the jurisdiction thereof. I mean, there is some wiggle room in that clause, and subject to the jurisdiction thereof as to whether or not they could be a U.S. citizen. And that's what Trump is pinning his promise or threat, depending on one's perspective, of an executive order. He's pinning it on that clause and hoping that would be enough to get it passed. Let's go to Apopka, the APK. John is on the Joe Kelley Show. Hey, John, how are you?
Hey, Joe. I'm worried about the dangerous precedents being set here. If we're going to enter into every political election with a threat to change the Constitution, every change of power then, even if we, God forbid, get another Democrat in office, is going to be, well, I don't like what the First Amendment gives you or what the Second Amendment gives you. So I think it opens up a dangerous ground and precedents I really don't want to see become commonplace.
I think if any of the lawmakers thought for a second that the Constitution would be easy to change, they would have gone after the Second Amendment a long time ago. And I think the lawmakers, I think there's a lot of fun. I think they enjoy threatening parts of the Constitution, but the Constitution is deliberately difficult to amend. It's deliberately difficult to change. And I don't think that Trump is going to have success in ending the birthright citizenship unless that clause is able to give him the out. And that is ultimately going to come down to the Supreme Court's interpretation of that. And frankly, at this point, most of the justices there are conservative, many of whom were appointed by Donald Trump, and it is entirely possible that the Supreme Court could see it his way. Let's go to Tom in Oviedo at 844-580-WDBO. Tom, you're on the Joe Kelley Show. How are you?
Hey, I'm good, Joe. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.
Hey, good. Hey, Joe, listen, really quick. I just going back to the Trump DeSantis thing. I've been watching Trump. A couple of interviews he had on Fox News. Watched the CNN town hall. And honestly, what's he, 76 now? He's just not as sharp as he was. I mean, I don't know if you've noticed it, but I just find he's repeating the same thing over and over a little bit more than he used to. Takes him a little bit longer to respond to things. So I think that's something that DeSantis really needs to hit home. The DeSantis campaign really needs to hit home on that because, again, I voted for Trump twice. I'm not going to say anything negative about him, right. But the guy's going to be 80 in his 80s. And do we need another? And I know a lot of people have talked about it, but I'm really starting to notice it more than before. Do we need another 80-year-old president? I got to tell you, Tom, I don't think I've noticed the same degradation of him that perhaps you have, but in principle, I agree with you completely. I would much rather have a 40-something-year-old president than a 7.
The Joe Kelley Show on WDBO. Now, the three big things you need to know.
3. The executive who helped build the Golden State Warriors into an NBA dynasty is stepping away from the franchise. Bob Myers told ESPN he is stepping down as the team's president and general manager. The two-time executive of the year said it's just time. 2. The U.S. is working to approve Sweden's bid to join NATO. During a visit to Sweden today, Secretary of State Antony Blinken said he believes that could happen in the coming weeks. Ahead of a NATO summit in Lithuania in early July, Turkey and Hungary have prevented Sweden from joining the alliance. 1. 9 people are recovering after a mass shooting near a Florida beach on Memorial Day. The incident happened in Hollywood, where local officials say 4 of the victims are juveniles. The shooting stemmed from an altercation between 2 groups.
You're listening to The Joe Kelley Show. You can always find The Joe Kelley Show podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, you can get them in the on-demand button in the WDBO app and so much more. We were talking about whether or not President Trump says on his first day he will end birthright citizenship for children of illegal immigrants if he wins the 2024 race.
Hey, Joe. I was trying to call in, but I think I got the wrong number when you repeated it. But listen, a couple of things. DeSantis voted for him. But a couple of things that I believe right now that he might not be good is at foreign affairs. I think that if we get him in front of some of these veteran people from other countries, I don't know if he'll do good at it.
So I think you're talking about DeSantis there as to whether or not DeSantis would be good at foreign affairs. And yes, obviously being just a governor and just a congressman doesn't give him a whole lot of foreign policy experience. And while Donald Trump is a more worldly traveled, worldly businessed person, Donald Trump didn't have any foreign policy expertise when he became president either. Neither did Barack Obama. I mean, the list goes on. So one can get up to speed. They'll need a good staff that surrounds them.
And by the way, Trump, as an illiterate of the law that he is, because more dumber than that guy, nobody, the only one who can change the Constitution is the Supreme Court and a referendum to the people. So that's the only two that can change literally the Constitution. Nobody else, no Congress, nobody. So if Trump thinks that he's going to end citizen versus whatever he thinks, he's insane.
I got to say, you're a regular open micer. I don't appreciate the attitude. I do appreciate your confidence, especially that you're wrong. But you're so confident in yourself, and I love your confidence, but you're wrong about how the Constitution can get amended. The U.S. Supreme Court cannot amend the Constitution. There are only two ways to amend the Constitution, and both go through Congress. One is either a joint resolution passed by Congress or a constitutional convention called by Congress. Those are the only two ways to change the Constitution, and those happen few and far between, that's for sure. Let's go to Bob in Orlando. You're on the Joe Kelley Show. And Bob, I don't have a lot of time here, but I want to get your story.
Yeah, so I'll go quick. So I'm a naturalized citizen, but I'm a U.S. citizen born abroad because I was on a military base. My father was military. My mom was from Canada. I didn't become a citizen until we come back to the U.S. 2 years later. So I have my birth certificate, which is from the country I was born, and then I have to have naturalization papers showing I'm a citizen, and then I also have a certificate saying I'm a U.S. citizen born abroad. Now, because of that, anybody born outside the U.S. that comes in, they become a naturalized citizen, then they have that document, but their birth certificate would show their other foreign country. But my issue is when they went to electronic system for Social Security to see who was actually a citizen, they kicked everybody out. Me, my brother, and sister were born overseas. We all got kicked out of Social Security. We had to go down there, show our card, show our paperwork, get put back in the system again. So my problem is I don't trust the government because they made me a non-citizen without my being aware of it. My brother found out trying to get school money.
Bob, it's interesting, and I would start every conversation about the government with, I don't trust the government. And I'm right there with you. I don't trust the government, no matter who is in charge. My name is Joe Kelley. Thank you so much for being a part of the Joe Kelley Show. We'll see you back here tomorrow night. The third hour of Sean Hannity is coming up next.
When you save on auto insurance for driving safe with USAA Safe Pilot, you'll feel like a big deal, even in a traffic jam. Save up to 30% with USAA Safe Pilot. Restrictions apply.